They say home is where you're cared for without question. But sometimes, the quietest betrayal comes from the hands that once held yours. I still remember the morning I came back from the hospital. My bedroom door was locked. Boxes filled with my life sat stacked in the hallway. My name was still on the mailbox. But my presence had already been erased. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They simply removed me like a piece of old furniture no longer needed in the room. So I left. Not with rage, but with a notebook and a quiet decision. Subscribe if you understand the weight of being treated like a burden, even after holding a whole family on your shoulders. This is not a story about revenge. This is a story about clarity, about silence that becomes strength, and a woman who remembered who she was when no one else did. I didn't leave home with a bang. I left quietly. But before that, I truly believed something beautiful was beginning again. Brian moved back in on a Tuesday. He had just finalized his divorce and said the apartment he was staying in felt too small, too lonely. I remember how his voice cracked a little when he said he missed the sound of our old kitchen clock. That clock had been broken for years, but I didn't mention it. He hugged me tighter than usual that day, said it was time he stepped up and looked after me. That word stayed with me, looked after. It felt warm, safe, almost like the boy I used to know had come back, and not just the man life had worn thin. I cleaned out the guest room for him, put fresh sheets on the bed, lavender scented, brought out the casserole dish he always liked, the one with chipped edges from all those Sundays. I made pot roast the first night. He didn't eat much, said he was tired, but he smiled. And that was enough. In those early days, he did all the right things. Fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom, repainted the back fence that had been flaking since spring, even brought me a new phone charger without me asking. Little things, thoughtful things. It's amazing how quickly a tired heart clings to gestures like that. We fell into a rhythm. Mornings with coffee. Afternoons with him pacing the backyard, taking calls. Evenings quiet. Sometimes with the television on low. Sometimes just the ticking of that broken clock echoing across the room. I thought this is what it means to grow old and be loved. Not flowers, not vacations, just a familiar voice coming down the stairs. Sometimes I caught him staring at the family pictures in the hallway. He didn't say much, but there was a softness in his face I hadn't seen in years. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Either way, I took it as a sign that we were healing, that life was finally circling back to kindness. One morning, he brought a stack of papers into the kitchen. Nothing urgent, just utility forms, he said. Said he wanted to help take care of the bills, since I shouldn't be running around in the heat to pay them. Told me it would be easier if everything was under his name. I didn't read much of it. I trusted him. And that trust felt like the last precious thing I still owned. So I picked up my pen and signed wherever he pointed. Looking back now, it's strange how quiet betrayal is in the beginning. It doesn't wear a mask. It doesn't knock. It just slips in, wearing the same face you once kissed goodnight. If you've ever mistaken comfort for safety, if you've ever believed a soft tone meant good intentions, stay with me. Because what came next was the kind of silence that doesn't echo back. It started with the gate. One morning, I stepped outside to water the plants and saw the old latch had been replaced. A brand new lock was in its place. Heavy, shiny. Not something you find on sale at the hardware store. I didn't say anything. He handed me a new key over breakfast, said the old lock was too rusty, that it was for my safety. I nodded, took the key. It felt strange in my hand. Later that week, he came home with more folders, said the utility companies were making everything digital, told me again how I shouldn't have to deal with long lines or confusing apps, Said it would be easier if the bills were under his name. The tone in his voice was easy, familiar. He sat down beside me at the kitchen table and opened the stack of papers. "Just a few signatures," he said. He pointed to spots already marked with sticky notes. "Electric, water, internet." I signed, page after page, a small shuffle between each one. He kept talking as I wrote. Something about interest rates, something about his friend at the bank. I didn't follow all of it. I didn't try to. I trusted the boy who once called me mama in the middle of the night. The boy who used to draw stick figures of us holding hands. Even when his hair started turning gray, I still saw that boy. He thanked me after I was done, said he'd file it all online, cleared the table like nothing happened. That evening, I opened the pantry and noticed something else. The file box. The one where I kept copies of my tax returns, birth certificates, the deed to the house. It had been moved. Still there. Still closed. But the dust line was different. The next morning, he left earlier than usual. Said he had a phone call at the bank. Mentioned it offhand while putting on his shoes. I swept the kitchen, fed the cat. And something about the quiet felt too still. Not peaceful, just still. That night, he brought home takeout, my favorite. Said he'd had a long day. Talked about refinancing, about getting ahead, about opportunity. I just nodded. The food tasted fine, but something in my stomach stayed cold. It's strange how a house can feel familiar and foreign at the same time. The furniture was the same. The walls hadn't moved, but I had started to shrink inside it, little by little. And even though nothing had changed on the surface, something invisible had shifted like a draft coming from a door you didn't know was open. The hospital stay wasn't planned. I had slipped on a bit of water near the bathtub. It wasn't serious, but the doctor insisted I stay for observation. 3 nights. Brian was attentive at first. He brought flowers the second day, left early the third, said he had errands to run. I didn't mind. I was used to being alone. When they discharged me, I didn't call him. I just hailed a cab and gave the driver my address. It was early evening when we pulled into the driveway. The porch light was already on. For a moment, I smiled. Then I noticed the boxes. Cardboard, sealed with tape, lined up neatly in the hallway, right behind the front door. I stepped over them and made my way down the hall. The house smelled different, like lemon cleaner and old air. When I reached my bedroom, I tried the door. It didn't open. I checked the knob again, turned it harder. It was locked. I stood there for a while, not knocking, just standing. There was a folded note on the side table in the living room. My name was on it. Just my name. Inside was a printed message. No handwriting. It said, "Mom, we've decided to sell the house. This will be better for everyone. You should consider looking into a care facility, someplace safe and professional." I read it twice, not because I didn't understand, but because I couldn't feel anything. The living room looked cleaner than I remembered. Too clean. The photos on the shelf were gone. My slippers weren't by the armchair. I checked the kitchen. The pantry was empty. Even the drawer with the spare keys had been cleared out. I sat down at the edge of the couch. No yelling. No panic. Just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the faint throb in my hip. The phone buzzed. It was a text from Brian. Short. "I'm sorry this had to be sudden, but the paperwork is already moving. We'll help you transition." I didn't respond. I didn't call. I stood up, walked back to the door, and stepped outside. The cab was still idling by the curb. The driver had left the engine running. I climbed back in. He looked at me in the mirror, didn't ask anything, just waited. I told him the name of a senior care home I remembered seeing in a brochure once. He nodded, started driving. We passed the park where Brian used to ride his bike, the school where I stood in the rain one year holding his forgotten lunch. the street corner where he first learned how to cross without holding my hand. It all went by in silence, and I let it. When we arrived, the woman at the front desk asked for my name, said they had a guest room available. I told her I didn't know how long I'd be staying. She smiled, like she'd heard that before. She handed me a key card. Room 2C. That night, I didn't unpack, just sat on the bed with the lights off, listening to the soft buzz of the hallway. There were no family photos on the nightstand, no slippers waiting by the door. But it was quiet, and the quiet didn't pretend to care. I reached for the small notebook in my bag, opened to the first page, wrote down the date, and under it, just one sentence: he locked the room. But I'm still the one holding the story. The room at the care home was small but clean, pale green walls, a window that looked out over a modest courtyard. It smelled like floor polish and chamomile tea. No one there asked many questions. I was just another quiet arrival. And for the first few days, that was fine with me. I didn't cry. I didn't talk much either. Instead, I watched. At breakfast, I sat by the window and listened to the rustle of newspapers, to nurses calling out reminders about medication, to the sighs of people who had also stopped explaining themselves. I kept my bag close. Inside it, a notebook. Nothing fancy, just lined paper and a blue pen. On the first page, I wrote the message Brian left, word for word. Then the text. Then the date I had signed those documents in the kitchen. I wrote everything I remembered. Slowly, clearly, names, times, phrases he used. Each entry steadied me. Each sentence pulled the story into the light. One morning, a young man named Danny helped me figure out the internet on the common room computer. He was volunteering there for college credit. He showed me how to log into my online banking. It took a few tries. I had never done it before. But eventually, I saw it. My checking balance was lower than I remembered. Savings had a withdrawal, not a small one. And my name was no longer the only one attached to the account. Danny leaned over and frowned. I didn't ask for his opinion. I just thanked him and logged out. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I opened the notebook again. Under the last entry, I wrote a single question in my own head. Not on the page, not aloud, but it stayed with me. What else had he taken while I wasn't looking? The next day, I sat on the bench outside. The sun was warm, and the air smelled like dry leaves. Mary showed up without warning. She had always been like that. Never waited to be invited. Just arrived. She stood in front of me with her arms crossed and eyes sharp. Said she had heard from someone that I had moved into a facility. Said she didn't believe it until she saw it. I looked up at her. Didn't explain. Didn't deny. She sat down beside me without asking. For a while, we said nothing. Then she asked what happened. Not with words, but with the way she placed her hand over mine. So I told her. Not everything, just enough. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, just nodded once. When I finished, she stood up, said she'd be back in a few days. I didn't ask where she was going. I just watched her walk away. And for the first time since I left the house, I felt something shift back into place. Not the past, not the home, but the edge of something I thought I had lost. A reason, a direction, and a voice that didn't need to raise itself to be heard. 3 days later, Mary came back. No phone call, no warning, just her silhouette in the doorway of the courtyard holding a manila folder in one hand and a rolled-up flyer in the other. She didn't smile, didn't say hello. She walked straight to the bench where I was sitting and dropped both items beside me. She said, "That's your house. On the flyer. Listed for sale. Open house next Saturday. Your name is still on the title, but that's not your signature." I picked it up slowly. It was a color printout. There was a photo of the front yard. My front yard. The one Brian used to ride his tricycle across, and I used to sweep every Sunday morning. The asking price was printed bold and clean. It was higher than I expected. Mary tapped the folder, said she'd gone to the county office, had a friend there who owed her a favor. Inside was a copy of the deed transfer and the authorization form I had signed. Except it wasn't mine. Not all of it. The page showed the same typeface, the same date, but the signature was off, too neat, too smooth. Mary leaned in, lowered her voice. I've worked with you 20 years. I've seen you sign your name more times than I've seen my own. That's not you. And this is not a misunderstanding. It's a setup. I kept looking at the paper, not angry, not confused, just still. I ran my finger along the edge of the signature. My stomach didn't twist. It settled, like the moment when a bruise stops hurting and just turns dark. Mary sat down beside me again. This time, she didn't speak. She just waited. I folded the flyer, placed it gently back inside the folder, held it in my lap. A woman from the staff passed by and smiled at us, asked if we needed anything. We both said no. After she left, I said, "This isn't just about betrayal anymore. It's about theft, and I'm done treating it like family drama." Mary nodded. Her voice was low but steady. "You're not alone in this. You never were. You just forgot you didn't have to carry it all by yourself." I looked up at the sky. It was cloudy, but I could tell the sun was trying to break through. For the first time in weeks, I let the folder rest heavy in my hands. Not like a burden, but like a starting point. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. I read it. Every page, every name, every number. Each word reminded me I wasn't losing my mind. I was tracking a crime. I closed the cover, set it beside my bed, and for the first time since leaving my house, I slept through the night without waking up once. I checked out of the care home on a Tuesday morning, signed the form, returned the key card, packed only what I had brought in, one suitcase, one notebook, and the folder Mary gave me. I found a small room for rent near downtown, second floor of a quiet duplex, the kind of place where no one asks your story as long as your check clears. The landlady offered to help carry my bag. I told her I was fine, and I meant it. The room had one window facing a brick wall and a twin bed with a creaky frame, but it felt honest, and for now, that was enough. That afternoon, I called Mr. Harris. He was the attorney who helped me and my husband with our wills years ago. He used to keep a photo of his dog on his desk. I remembered the dog's name. His secretary picked up, said he could meet me Thursday morning. No questions asked, held. When I arrived at his office, he looked older but no less sharp. Same posture, same quiet eyes. He offered me water. I declined. He sat across from me and asked how he could help. I placed the folder on the table. Then I placed the notebook beside it. Open to the first page. I didn't speak with emotion. I spoke with sequence, date, document, signature, withdrawal, message. Each line I delivered like a brick, one after the other, until the wall was complete. Mr. Harris didn't interrupt, didn't push back. He flipped through the copies slowly, paused at the signature. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, said he would need a few days to verify the documents and make contact with the county records office. He asked if I had spoken to Brian. I said no, and that I didn't plan to. He nodded, said I had done the right thing by coming in, that most people wait too long, or try to fix it with family talks. I said, "This isn't a family talk anymore. This is paperwork, and I'm ready for it." Before I left, He asked it one last thing, said he needed to know if I was prepared to go all the way if this became a legal battle. I looked him in the eye, not with anger, not with pride, just with clarity. And I said, I'm not here to win. I'm here to stop pretending. Outside, the sky was gray but steady. I walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop, ordered tea, and sat by the window. The city moved around me. No one looked twice. And that felt like freedom. That evening, back in my rented room, I laid out every document across the bed, used sticky notes to mark the dates, numbered the pages. When I finished, I didn't feel tired. I felt aligned, like something that had been crooked for too long was finally beginning to stand straight. And for the first time in years, I remembered the version of myself who knew how to file things, how to speak clearly, how to hold her ground and mean it. The rain came that night, slow and even, tapping against the window like a memory trying to be let in. I didn't turn on the light. I sat on the edge of the bed, the folders still open, papers half stacked, half fanned out like the mess I had spent years pretending wasn't there. There are certain truths you avoid because you love someone. And there are other truths you bury because you can't bear to look at yourself. Brian wasn't always this way. But he also wasn't a stranger to cutting corners. I remembered the late-night calls from collection agencies, the time I paid off his credit card without telling his father, the broken lease in college, the quiet loan I signed for thinking it would be the last. Every time, I told myself he just needed a little more time, a second chance, a clean slate. And every time, I erased the part where he should have learned something. I called it love, but maybe it was just fear. Fear that if I didn't keep saving him, he'd slip so far I wouldn't be able to find him anymore. I remembered how his father used to warn me. You're helping him delay the fall, he said. But when it comes, it'll be harder because he'll think someone's always going to catch him. I brushed those words off back then, told myself it was harsh, that Brian needed grace, not judgment. Now, sitting in a rented room with a fake signature on a real deed, I could finally admit his father had been right. But I didn't feel regret. Not exactly. It was something heavier and quieter, the kind of sorrow that has no one to blame because it comes from what you allowed. I reached for the notebook again, not to write, just to hold. It felt like the only thing in that room that hadn't lied to me. I thought about the version of myself from a month ago, smiling in the kitchen, signing those forms, feeling grateful that my son wanted to help. I thought about the version of myself years ago making excuses to neighbors, covering bounced checks, saying he was just going through a rough patch. And I thought about the version of myself as a girl watching her own mother disappear into the corners of her home, too quiet, too tired, too proud to say she was angry. I had become her without even noticing. But not tonight. Tonight, I saw every piece of the puzzle and where I had placed each one. I didn't feel angry with Brian. I didn't even feel sad for him. I felt finished. That doesn't mean I was done fighting. It means I was done hoping that he would change on his own. Change doesn't come with hope. It comes with boundaries. And I had finally found mine. I closed the notebook, stood up, pulled the curtain open all the way, let the gray light of the street lamps pour into the room. No tears, no speeches, just breath, even and full. Sometimes, the clearest moment in a woman's life is not when she leaves, but when she finally stops explaining why she stayed. And as I stood there watching the rain streak the glass, I knew one thing for sure. This story was no longer about what had been taken. It was about what I was taking back. By the end of the week, Mr. Harris called, said he had something, told me to come in. The office looked the same. Wood paneling, shelves of neatly labeled folders, the smell of old coffee and printer ink. He didn't waste time, spread the documents across the table, walked me through what he had found. There was a withdrawal from my savings. $38,000. Done in person. The bank security footage showed Brian standing at the counter handing over an envelope with my name on the authorization. He was calm, smiling, wearing a button-down shirt like it was just another errand. Mr. Harris paused the video, waited for my reaction. I stayed quiet. He slid another paper across the table, a notarized copy of the power of attorney, filed the same week I had signed the so-called utility forms. Buried in the stack Brian had me sign, there was no witness signature, no legal consultation, just my name, written in strokes that looked like mine but sat too evenly on the page, too smooth, too practiced. Mr. Harris leaned forward, said we had a case, a strong one, forgery, financial abuse, fraud. He explained the steps: injunction, civil suit, possibility of criminal charges. Said it wouldn't be fast, but it would be real. I didn't ask for outcomes. I didn't ask for guarantees. I just asked, what's next? He said, we freeze the sale. We notify the buyers. We start discovery. He made calls, filed papers, requested the footage be secured, pulled bank records, contacted the registrar's office. Each action was measured, precise, unemotional. And yet, as I watched him work, I felt something return to me that I hadn't realized was missing. Agency. The sense that my life was once again in the hands of someone who respected it. When I left his office, I walked slowly, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to feel every step. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a comeback. It was a correction. I stopped by a print shop, made copies of everything, kept one set at the room, gave one set to Mary, just in case. Not out of fear, but out of preparation. That night, I boiled water for tea and sat at the small table by the window. Outside, a couple argued in low voices. Somewhere across the street, a baby cried. Life kept moving, unaware, unbothered. And yet for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was just watching it. I was back in it, still bruised, still unsure how deep the damage went, but present. And from that small table in a room that wasn't mine, I began to imagine a world where I could choose again, where I could live without flinching every time someone offered help, where silence wasn't a cage but a choice, and where truth once locked away behind trust was finally being let out into the air and allowed to breathe. He found me. I don't know how. Maybe it was Mary. Maybe it was the bank notices. Maybe it was just guilt. He showed up outside the duplex one evening, dressed too casually, as if this was just a visit and not the wreckage of something deliberate. He looked smaller, palms sweaty, eyes rimmed red, but not from crying, from exhaustion or nerves. I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. He started talking right away, words tumbling, apologies hidden between excuses. Said he was desperate, said he had debts, said he didn't think it would go this far, said he only meant to borrow against the house just long enough to get back on his feet, said he was scared, of collectors, of losing custody, of losing everything. He said the system was against him, said I was all he had left, said he loved me. I listened, not because I believed him, but because I needed to hear just how far he'd go to make it not his fault. Then he dropped to his knees, right there on the front step, crying or performing or both. I looked at him and saw not my son, but a man who had learned that his own mother would always clean up the mess. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I walked inside, grabbed a folder from the table, and came back out. I placed it in his hands. He flipped through the pages. Court notice, temporary injunction, demand for repayment, notification of pending investigation. He looked up at me, eyes wide, mouth open, still searching for the version of me that used to flinch when he was in pain. But I was not that woman anymore. I said nothing, just waited while the truth filled the silence between us. He stood up slowly, said he didn't know what else to say. I nodded, because there was nothing else to say. He left without another word. Didn't look back. I stood there until the street lamp came on, until the night reclaimed the sidewalk. Then I turned back inside, closed the door, and for the first time in years, locked it for myself. Mr. Harris moved fast. Within a week, the court approved the injunction. The sale was frozen. No papers could be filed. No new owners could move in. The couple who had made the offer on the house got the letter first. They were young, newly married, dreaming of a yard and a dog. Mr. Harris showed me the response from their lawyer. They were stunned, thought everything was clean. Turns out they were just another stop in someone else's shortcut. It hurt to see their faces on the attached photo, standing on the porch, smiling next to the for sale sign. But this wasn't about them, and Mr. Harris said the law would make sure they were made whole. The county clerk's office flagged the title transfer. The notary listed on the power of attorney couldn't be found. No record of a legal consultation. It unraveled quickly after that. Bank subpoenas confirmed the withdrawal. Video evidence secured. Digital timestamps matched the story in my notebook down to the hour. Brian was issued a summons. Formal, direct, unavoidable. When Mary heard the news, she let out a quiet, "Good," then poured tea like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. I wasn't chasing punishment. I was restoring fact. The police asked a few questions. Mr. Harris handled most of it. I answered when I had to. Calm, clear. Every time they asked for a document, I had it. Labeled, copied, dated. There was something deeply grounding about having the truth on paper. One morning, Mr. Harris called, said we'd done enough, that the case was moving. He used a phrase I hadn't heard in years, open and shut. Later that day, I passed the house. I hadn't meant to. The cab just turned that way. The sign was gone. The porch was empty. The curtains were drawn. It looked silent, not peaceful, just paused, like a breath held too long. I didn't ask the driver to stop. I just watched it shrink in the side mirror. The house was no longer mine. Not because of paperwork, but because I had released it from being the only place I thought I mattered. That night, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. Short, even, certain. The law is slow, but it remembers. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, in mood. The kind of cold that comes from beige walls, humming lights, and people waiting for their turn to speak. I wore a navy coat, the one with the rounded buttons and clean seams, hair tied back, no makeup, no jewelry. Mr. Harris walked beside me, clipboard in one hand, quiet certainty in the other. Brian was already there, sat at the defendant's table, shoulders hunched, eyes darting anywhere but at me. His lawyer looked young, unprepared, confident in all the wrong ways. The judge entered, called the case. Introductions were made, and then they asked me to speak. I stood, walked to the front, placed my notebook on the witness table. No tears, no anger, just facts. I spoke with clarity, walked them through the days, the papers, the signatures, the withdrawals. I didn't dramatize, didn't linger, just said, this is what happened. When Brian's lawyer tried to object, Mr. Harris responded before I had to, every time. Then came the bank footage, projected in silence. The judge leaned forward. There he was, my son, smiling, signing, taking. Then came the expert, a handwriting analyst, confirmed what Mary already knew. That signature wasn't mine. When Brian's lawyer claimed memory loss, Mr. Harris calmly handed over a notarized statement from the original care home noting my mental clarity during intake. I didn't flinch. I didn't look at Brian. I looked at the judge and said I trusted him, and he used that trust to empty my life while I was recovering from a fall. Then I sat down. The room was still. No shouting, no theatrics, just wait. The judge spoke slowly. He said, "The court finds the defendant guilty of financial exploitation, fraudulent transfer of property, and forgery." He paused, looked at Brian, then he delivered the sentence. 3 years probation, mandatory repayment, 500 hours of community service at a senior care facility. He said, "Maybe working with the elderly will teach you what your mother tried to give you your entire life." Brian didn't speak, didn't move. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to help him. I stood, thanked the court, collected my notebook, walked past him without looking back. Outside, the wind had picked up, leaves gathering in small corners of the sidewalk. The courthouse steps felt steady under my feet. Mary waited across the street, leaning against a lamppost, hands in her coat pocket. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. I nodded once, and she nodded back. That night, in my room, I opened the notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote a single sentence. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just shows up right on time and leaves the door open on the way out. The house never went back to the market. The sale was voided. Every document Brian filed was erased. Every false step undone by a signature that finally mattered. Mine. But I didn't move back in. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. The house was never the point. It was the symbol of what I had built, of what had been taken, of what I had reclaimed. Once the court closed the case, I called a real estate agent, a kind woman with quiet hands and no push in her voice. I told her I wanted to sell the house on my own terms. She understood. It sold within a month, to a retired couple with soft voices and an old golden retriever. I gave them the garden tools, told them where the good light hits in the kitchen at 4 p.m. Before I left for good, I walked through each room one last time. The living room, where Brian took his first steps. The hallway, where I hung report cards and birthday banners. The back porch, where my husband used to sit reading the paper with a cup of black coffee. I stood there for a while, let it all come back, then let it go. I used part of the sale to help the young couple who almost bought the house under false terms, paid their legal fees, left a note in their mailbox. I used another part to make a quiet donation to a legal aid foundation for older adults. No big announcement, no name on a wall, just a sealed envelope and a thank you letter that now sits on my new kitchen table. Because yes, I moved into a small apartment on the second floor next to the library. 2 rooms, bright windows, a tea kettle that sings softly when the water's ready. I spend my mornings reading, my afternoons walking. Sometimes I write, not stories, just reflections. A few neighbors know my name. One brings them me soup on rainy days. Mary visits on Sundays. She still doesn't knock, still brings too much bread. The world didn't change. It still moves loud and fast. But I don't, not anymore. I don't rush to explain. Don't rush to forgive. Don't rush to please. Now, I choose what enters my home, my head, and my heart. The past didn't vanish. It just learned how to take its seat in the corner and stay quiet while I live. Some days I think of Brian, not with anger, not even with sadness, just distance. He texts sometimes. I don't always reply, because silence is not the absence of love. Sometimes it's the only love that protects what's left of you. I sit by the window now, tea in one hand, that letter from the foundation in the other. It says, "Thank you for believing that justice matters at any age." I smile. Not big, but real. Because I know now I wasn't too old to start over. I wasn't too late to speak up. And I wasn't wrong to expect more, even from family. Sometimes peace doesn't come from getting back what you lost. It comes from knowing you never really lost yourself.